Good morning, everybody. I'm Dolores McDonough. You'll hear a little bit more about me during the official introductions part, but welcome to Finding Your Voice Through Social Media. I've been informed we'll probably have a couple of people sneak in, which is great. We're going to be doing some audience participation later, so the more people we have sharing in virtually and in real time, I think will help everybody. So welcome. What we're going to do today is we're going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning finding out about our panelists, but also finding out a little bit about you and your experience with social media. And then we're going to have a little bit of an overview of social media today and how, if you're interested in developing your personal or professional brand on social media, some things you should be thinking about. Then we're going to have an in-depth panel discussion focused on a couple of particular channels, but with some personal stories about how some of our panelists have discovered some new things about social media through their work. And then we're going to have some hands-on work, take a look at how you might look at content that on ACS's website and how you might become a bit of a social ambassador for ACS. And then throughout, we're going to, especially during the panel discussion part, you should feel free to ask questions. There's a mic here. If you're like me, you might not need the mic as much. And then we'll also have time at the end as well for some discussion and questions. So we'll let a couple of people filter in and get started with introductions. I'm going to start with Adam over here on our left, and I've assigned his favorite social media to be Twitter, so that's his part of his Twitter page there. So Adam, I know you're a board member of ACS, and I thought I'd give you just a minute to just chat about your life.
Well, I was born. Well, thank you all for coming here. All you need to know about my life is that before social media, there was none. So now I'm alive again. I am a professor at UCLA School of Law and a board member here at the American Constitution Society. I've been the faculty advisor for my chapter at UCLA for, I guess, about 12 years now, maybe 10, 11, 12 years. I'm just getting up there in years, so it's hard for me to remember exactly how many. But I got on Twitter a few years ago, I guess around 2010 or 2011. Is it possible that early? God. Yeah, my book was coming out, and I said I wanted to be more of a media presence. I wanted to have a bigger voice. I wanted people to hear what I thought I had an unusual perspective on the right to bear arms and the Second Amendment. The Supreme Court had just heated up that area in 2008 with the Heller case. I had a book coming out in 2011, and I said I wanted to really embrace the social media, figure out how to work it. And I am anything but an expert in it, but I have used it successfully, I think, in the past, and hopefully I have some helpful ways of thinking about using Twitter.
Great. Lena.
Yes, I am Lena Zornstein. I'm the Director of Strategic Engagement here at the American Constitution Society. I've actually been circling around ACS probably before social media was really a thing. I actually snuck into a convention. I probably shouldn't admit that. Before I even went to law school. And then once I went to law school, I founded the student chapter at Michigan State University. So hopefully, maybe we have any Michiganders in the room? Or nice. Excellent. And then actually, that's when I actually started on Facebook. Thank goodness it didn't exist before then, probably. But I then went to Boston and worked for a large nonprofit organization called Jumpstart, doing early education, higher education, and AmeriCorps, national service type of policy and programming. And I actually very much engaged on Twitter in particular. That's when town halls and so on were very, very popular. But I also stuck around with ACS, and I became part of the Boston Lawyer Chapter steering committee. So hopefully we have some Bostonians, maybe. A little less so. That gives me a little bit of pride in Michigan. And then about 2.5 years ago, just over, I joined the staff at ACS. And in my capacity as the Director of Strategic Engagement, I try to engage people in understanding just how important the courts are. I think that this is something that this audience knows a lot about. But within that realm, I also work very specifically on judges, the federal judiciary, judicial nominations. So regularly I interact with the Senate that has that important advice and consent role, according to the Constitution anyways, as well as our coalition partners, our chapters, and so on. And so it's an honor to be here and try to share with you a little bit of what I know from various channels. I know I'll be talking a little bit more about podcasting actually. But.
Yeah. Great. And I'm Dolores McDonough. I assigned Lena to LinkedIn. I don't know if that's, a big channel for you or not, but, I was just trying to have a little diversity in our presentation. I'm Dolores McDonough. I work for a digital marketing agency called Charity Dynamics. We work exclusively with nonprofits to help them engage more people, find more supporters, raise more money, those kinds of things. My channel is, my preferred channel is Facebook. When you hear about the demographics of Facebook, you'll understand why. The person on the right is my millennial son, who is my social media consultant, my personal one. And this was his high school graduation 2 years ago from a local high school here, which popped up a couple of days ago on my memory feed in Facebook, where I shared it again because 2 years later he was going back to Montgomery Blair's graduation ceremonies, as he put it, as a body man for our Congressman Jamie Raskin, who he is interviewing with now. And he's a sophomore at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, great school. He's a political science and ancient studies major. And his favorite class so far has been political philosophy, which combines those two things. But we've been having a lot of tears and a lot of fun over the last 6 or 8 months talking about politics and how to get the word out there. So I apologize in advance. People always hear about my family during presentations. So you'll hear a little bit more about family and friends and how they connect to how I use social media to not only share personally, but also to talk about either work or issues that really matter to me. So consider yourself warned. So let's, before we start, I'd like to just do a little bit of introductions in the room by nature of, finding out where you are in your social media journey. So hands up, who's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat? Yeah, that's the one I keep saying to Noah, you gotta explain this to me. So Pinterest. Yeah, it's all the women. Oh, yeah, well, almost all the women. Yeah, you guys are all falling right into all the demographics of everything. And so let's see, are you primarily a social user of social media? So family, friends, cat videos? Okay. All right. You use it in your work? Are you using social media in your work? So, okay, great. Well, that was really helpful. We'll try to make sure. Yeah. Oh.
I don't know anything about social media, but I'm using it now.
There you go.
Just like us.
Yeah.
Any help from y'all?
There you go. Well,
As executive director of the Civil Jury Project at NYU School of Law,
my sister graduated from NYU School of Law.
preserve
Yeah.
jury trials in this country.
Okay.
One of the way we're trying to do it is to get the people who are summoned for jury duty and throw away their summons and don't report because they want to evade jury duty. To communicate with people who have served on juries.
What a great idea.
Terrific thing. And so we came up with the idea of doing it through social media. And we have a website called wethepeoplewethejury.com. And you can go to Twitter and Jury Matters. Hashtag Jury Matters. And I want you to look at these things in real time today and help me
Okay.
figure out. Because the key is, what we want to do is get people who receive summons, who are searching the web to figure out, they will come across these YouTubes on what you say to get out of jury duty.
You want to make jury duty cool again. Yeah.
I want them to go to this portal. You go to the jury website, there are 3 places to go in. Got a summons,
Okay, you know what, I'm gonna cut you off there and connect with you after. So, because I think after the presentation, you know,
Great.
yeah,
Make this nonprofit.
perfect. Great. All right, so let's talk a little bit about social media and the American Constitution Society, because hopefully you're all gonna leave today with some real value for your personal or your professional lives, but as usual, there's two sides to every coin, and ACS also hopes you leave with a commitment to becoming a social ambassador for the American Constitution Society. And like Shelby, live tweeting from conferences and spreading the word, but there's a great value there for you too, because we're gonna talk a lot about how other people's content is a great way to become a social media maven and well-known in the platform. So there's a real great partnership here between ACS and you in terms of being social ambassadors. So ACS uses a variety of social media platforms to do a number of things. There's a lot of breaking news that gets shared on ACS for its audience. And Linda Paris mentioned to me that she asked people constantly, how did you find out about ACS? And she said, more often than not, people say Twitter. They said, we saw something on Twitter that somebody retweeted, you know, it was really relevant to what I was studying or working on, and that was the path that I came to ACS. So breaking news is a big part of ACS's social media platform and its strategy. But they also go a lot deeper, do a lot of in-depth analyses, and they're also a platform used in a different sense, not the technical platform, but they are a platform for a lot of legal experts to get their word out there. So again, it's that partnership between ACS creating its commentary on legal and constitutional issues of the day, but also having other experts who use it as a way to get their word out there. And then finally, they use it to raise awareness, not only about the organization, but about the issues that matter to everybody here. For you, social media can be a whole host of things. It can be a place to watch cat videos. It can be a place to connect with family and friends. It can be a place where you can, as Adam said, say, you know, I want to raise my visibility in a particular group of people so that I can sell more books or get more high-quality students interested in coming to Berkeley. Berkeley, right? No, UCLA.
Berkeley.
Sorry.
That's great too. That's great too.
I just suffered social media death.
UCLA, right? Yes, sorry. And then finally, it can also be a place where you can build your personal brand. And I want to just start off by sharing, you know, one personal brand as someone who you probably all know who has really taken one life and transformed it through social media, and that is George Takei. I grew up a Trekkie. I was very young. My dad let us stay up late to watch Star Trek, so that was when I first encountered George Takei. And then years ago, much of my personal life, I spent working for the National Trust for Historic Preservation, a great organization. And at one of our conferences in Los Angeles, he's a very strong preservationist, historic preservationist, as a tool of economic development. So I got to sit next to him in the train station there that had been turned into a nice little dinner, and that was great. But unless you're living under a social media rock, you have probably seen somebody share or tweet something from George Takei. And he's really turned the channel into a way to reinvent himself, but also to communicate about issues that he cares about deeply. So, but for you, I mean, social media can be a little intimidating. There are a lot of channels, and too many to really be able to commit to all of them. So where to begin to think about what are your personal goals in social media, and what are the best outlets, channels, tactics, and strategy for you to use to achieve those goals? So the first thing you want to do is define your objectives. What is it that you're trying to do? Are you really just trying to connect with family and friends, share some things personally? Are you looking to use social media in your job? And what does that mean for how you present yourself in terms of knowing that your CEO is going to be seeing what you're tweeting and sharing? Or are you looking to build a real personal brand and profile in order to be able to end up on Oprah Winfrey or run for office someday. I know there's a session going on next door about running for office, and social media has become an incredible tool for people who are looking to get engaged in that realm. So once you've decided what it is you want to accomplish, why are you in this space, then you think about, okay, how do I hone that so that I can achieve those goals? And the first thing is, we all have so many things we're interested in. But if you're looking to leverage social media to really create a brand and become well known, you want to hone in on at most 3 things that you're going to be talking about in your social media. Because when people associate and follow you, they don't necessarily want to hear about your vacation to the Grand Canyon if they're coming there for constitutional law information. It's okay to occasionally share some of that stuff, but think about the 2 or 3 things that are really your area of expertise that you want to showcase in your social media. You also want to think about what makes you unique. Adam talked about the fact that he thought he had something particular to say about a very specific issue. And that's great, because there are no dearth of experts out there. And we're all trying to find, the right ones to follow. So really being able to articulate what makes you special and unique will be really helpful to you. Then you want to develop a positioning statement, which is sort of a fancy word for an elevator speech or whatever you want to say, that explains you and what those things are that make you unique. You want people to be able to see that quickly. I'm a long form person. So these kind of things are very hard for me to come down to a sentence or 2 or 3. So it takes me a long time to figure out how to be short. So one way to start that process, though, is to think about looking at your competition or going out on social media and looking at how other people are positioning themselves to be able to give you an idea of how you might do it. So a positioning statement, a brief summary of who you are, what you do, and today, what you stand for. Right? And it's okay to stand for being bipartisan if you're passionate about being bipartisan. But, unfortunately, today people are often looking for people who already share their views. And, if your goal is to have the largest audience, you may want to think about how you position what you stand for. The other thing is, keep your audience in mind. Your positioning statement might be about you, but it's going to be read or seen or heard by the people that you want to attract. Again, we talked about figuring out what makes you unique. How are you different from every other expert out there? And take a look at what other people are doing. This is Adam's Twitter, his positioning statement, constitutional law professor at UCLA. And that's one of the ways you can contact him or learn more about it. You can tweet at UCLA. An author, so you can, I don't need to read it to you, but he talks a little bit about his new book. And so in a very short period of time, you can learn a lot about Adam from his positioning statement. Another more famous positioning statement is Richard Branson. Troublemaker who believes in turning chaos into reality, otherwise known as Dr. Yes. So Richard Branson. And do I have one more here? I have one more here from my previous life, preservation. Barbara Mitchell Howard, a preservationist with futuristic tendencies. So she's done a great job there in very few words. The preservation community is actually quite diverse. And when I was vice president of membership of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, I used to get mail from people all the time, the people who said, if you show me one more picture of some rich dead white guy's house, I'm going to drop my membership, because preservation is all about Main Street and economic redevelopment and community building. And then I'd get, the letter from somebody saying, it's so sad that the trust has lost its way. and has gone into these urban areas. So, so this particular preservationist is telling us where she stands and what she stands for, that she's a preservationist with futuristic tendencies. So she is telling people that about her particular brand of preservation, and you can tell right away whether or not she's somebody that you want to follow. So you can say a lot in a few words, so it's worth spending time thinking about that. I talked a little bit already about audience, so you do want to think about who it is you want to talk to. Later on, we're going to have some stats on how many people are on different social media channels, and you really don't want to think about trying to connect with all 1.8 billion people on Facebook or whatever the number is now. So, because while social media is, there's a lot of jargon about likes and tweets and follows, and the word troll came up, I think, I overheard somebody talking about it. So, but at the end of the day, social media really still does exist for people to connect with people. I mean, more and more it's about companies connecting with people and organizations connecting with people, but at the purest sense and how the consumers of it want to feel is about a person connecting with them. And even if they're looking at, shoes on Amazon, they still want to feel like somebody's helping them find that perfect pair of shoes for them. So it's great to think about your audience when you're writing for social media or what it is you're going to tweet. And there's a marketing trick that I'm going to share with you that smart people use to frame that writing that they're doing. And the technical term is called a persona. What you do is create an image in your mind of who it is you're writing for. You're not writing for a set of demographics, you're writing to a person or people, but usually one is good. This is the ALS Society. You all probably remember the Ice Bucket Challenge. They're a client, and after they ended up with an additional 1.5 million people on their email database after the Ice Bucket Challenge, they really wanted to understand who those people were, but also all of their other audience segments so that they could speak to them in a way that was really meaningful to them. So we went through a really long 6-month process of talking to a lot of stakeholders and doing surveys and looking at their website and Google Analytics. And at the end of the day, we came out with stories about real people who were part of their audience segment. And this is Dean. Dean is living with ALS. He was a bus driver for a public school, and even for the first 5 years he was diagnosed, he was able to work, so he had these great connections with young people, and like my son, they told him about social media, so he actually was online. That's how he got his information. And now that he's retired, he still wants to stay involved, so he wants to stay involved on social media, but he also wants to do their fundraising walk to help find a cure. So there's a little story here that talks about Dean and his life, so that when people are talking to Dean from the ALS Association, whether it's one of their email marketers or their social media people, or even one of their staff members, they have this image of a real person in their mind. This is another one, a shorter one. It's commercially based. They can be pretty just fact-based. This is Alex. This is basically the demographic market for some company that wants to sell to 25 to 40-year-old males who are into fitness and wellness, shopping and fashion. Talks about their income. They're single. He's interested in women, and his language is English. So again, this is one that's a little bit more stripped down as opposed to a narrative version. So for you, I'm going to share with you another family story. When I think about writing sometimes, I think about my brother-in-law, Tim, who's on the right here. Tim, and this is his son, Sam, my nephew. You'll see more about Sam later. But Tim is this amazing redneck Renaissance guy. Lives outside of Richmond, didn't finish college, started his own company, is now happily retired. But he is this amazing conglomeration of libertarian, he's fascinating. So whenever I think about trying to convince somebody of something that I feel strongly about, I always think about Tim. How would I talk to Tim about this? And how would I keep the conversation so we're connecting and not yelling? And he's a great guy, and he makes me think really hard. So whenever I'm thinking about, or I need to convince somebody, especially somebody who's independent and doesn't quite match up with me, but we sync on certain levels, but not everyone, I think about Tim. So it can be, you can put a picture on your computer terminal of one person. So, but when you're writing, think about that person. The other thing that you want to think about is your voice. How is it that you want to come across when you speak? We talked a little bit about, are you doing social media for work? And is that a very different voice than when you're doing social media at home? So there's another chart here, and we'll make the presentation available. So if you want to study this stuff in more detail later, you can. But this is one of those grids that talk about your brand voice, your character. Do you want to be authoritative? Do you want to just come across as an expert, nothing but an expert, very professional? Or do you want to bring people in by being sort of playful and making it fun? Do you want to use complex language, or do you want to say good, very good? Is sort of what kind of language do you want to use to get across your ideas? Your tone, are you very scientific and clinical, or are you humble and self-deprecating? And then finally, what's your purpose? Are you looking to educate people, or are you looking to drive them to action? So in thinking about these things, this can help you come to how is it that you want to present yourself on social media. Then you need to figure out which social media platform is right for you, because you're going to hear later how active you need to be on social media in order to be able to really build a platform that people are going to find and connect with. So, there aren't many, with the exception of George Takei and Robert Reich, both of whom probably have staff who help them with this. You're going to need to sort of hone in on the right platform for you, because there are just too many of them out there. And each social media platform has its own personality and brand, so you're going to want to find one that's the right fit with what it is you want to accomplish. So we're just going to do some quick facts about some of the channels here. Yeah, I was close. 1.79 billion active users of Facebook right now. The average person on Facebook has 155 friends. So this is the key to social media. Connect with one person on social media, they share to their friends. Before you know it, you have 1.79 billion friends. 55 million status updates made every day. And it is not just about cat videos. I think you're all probably aware and have heard about, the fake news eruption. But, one of the Pew Charitable Trust did a study about a year ago that talked about, the high percentage of people who get their news from Facebook. So it is a legitimate news channel, and Facebook is going through some of their own soul searching about what is their role in facilitating that. They can no longer say, no, we're just a social media channel. 2016. I guess I'm in denial, and I'm already trying to think about 2018. Thank you. That was a typo. Hopefully the 2018 election will prove that social media will be used for good. Twitter, 317 million, much smaller audience, 1.8 billion, 317 million. Highly mobile device. 80% of users access it on mobile. It's a younger audience than Facebook. And then finally, there was for a long time, in the trades, it was all about it's dying, it's dead, Twitter, it's done. Now, it's never going to be done because it is the favorite channel of the media. So again, if you're looking to make an impact in that area, you have to be on Twitter because it is where the media go for news. But it is true, Donald Trump saved Twitter. Rumors of their death were very early because of candidate and President Trump. LinkedIn, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about LinkedIn. It's got a larger audience, but it really is all about work and jobs. So it may be right for you. ACS has a LinkedIn presence, but it's a group. So it's a closed group where people can connect with each other and talk with each other, which is a great opportunity. But in terms of building your personal brand, it's a great place. If you've got an article coming out, you can share it there, but it doesn't have the same kind of, it has a very specific purpose for everybody on it, and it's all about work. And the fun fact here is everybody on LinkedIn writes their own position statement, and you write it so that a potential employer would want to hire you. And the most overused word on LinkedIn is motivated. Another area of social media that can be great, especially if you're into the long form, or blogs. Blogs sort of showed up long before a lot of other tools, especially for organizations and companies who are the main users of this tool now. Although I have a couple of friends who have blogs that I follow religiously because they really have something to say that speaks to me. So if you really enjoy writing, if you feel like you can't fit what you have to say into 140 characters, and if you're willing to commit to an ongoing schedule of writing and posting, blogging can be for you. And in blogging, one of the things recently, there's been some study. I fight with my colleagues in Austin, Texas all the time. I came out of a direct mail world where we always learned, the letter needs to be as long as it needs to be to say what you need to say, and no longer than that. And a lot of time in Austin, my colleagues say, it's so long what you've given us for this email, or can't we just do a picture and a button? So I was a little bit vindicated to read recently that more is more, that Google, if you're going to do blog posts, you don't want to do just one paragraph. You really do want to deliver some depth and some value, and when you do that, you'll get better rankings in Google search engine optimization. So this is your real long-form social media hero blogs. And then the last one I'm going to highlight are podcasts, which are, they've been around for a while, but they're really the new kid on the block in terms of excitement and growth. Thanks in no small part to Serial. Who's heard of Serial? Yeah, Baltimore podcast that really just sort of took the world by storm. Not only for them, but got other people thinking, hey, I could do that. So in the next 12 months, 200 new car models are going to be sold with built-in podcast players. So instead of listening to books on tape, we'll all be listening to podcasts as we sit in traffic. So a quick summary, what's right for you in terms of if you're looking to either build your personal brand or be a social ambassador for ACS. What might be the right platform for you? Facebook could be a great platform to translate the issues the ACS deals with and bring it to a broader audience of your family and friends and their family and friends. So really making it, those issues matter, like jury duty. Facebook could be a great place, having people, when they finish their jury duty, take a selfie, because I'm sure you can't do it while you're in jury duty. But afterwards, hold up a sign that just said, I just did my duty, and post it on, with a big smile on your face. So then you can get people talking with their friends about it. Really was a great experience. Twitter, timely, important news. So, the last couple of days, I know that you all were here as opposed to, watching or listening. But those kinds of things that are going on in the moment is where people look for in Twitter. By blogging, you can really unleash your inner creative writer and go long. LinkedIn, it really is all about positioning you for your next job or getting clients. And then with podcasting, Lena's going to talk more about this later, but this is a real commitment. You're really passionate if you're committing to podcasting. So we talked a little bit about checking out your competition, but there's another word that I want you to think about, which is influencers. There are people like George Takei out there and other people who are already established in the community of that you're looking to get established in. And by learning from them and connecting with them, you can really bump up your profile more quickly than if you were just sort of, stopping people on the street and handing them your card and saying, follow me on Twitter or Facebook. So again, social media is about connecting with people, and all those influencers, they're people too. And so all the same things that motivate you motivate them. So the first thing you want to do is find those top influencers in your niche. And again, if you connect with Kevin or whoever here and make sure he knows you're at the session, we're going to send out a list of top social influencers that the ACS staff and some other people think would be great to follow. So another tactic to get you to share your information with the organization. But there's also a service called narrow.io. If you go on there, you can put in different topic areas, and it will highlight influencers for you that you might want to. So go find them, share, like, and reply to their posts. And then also be sure to thank them if they share or like your posts. Again, they're going to like you better. They're going to share more of what you do. And, conferences are a great place to find influencers and share influencers. This is a friend of mine on the left, a mom of my millennial son. And it's at a conference. She is the CEO of the African American Accountants, the CPA group. She was speaking at a conference, and one of the conference attendees tweeted or LinkedIn about her, and she thanked them. So it's a way to sort of curry favor with, a big maha in your industry by giving them visibility at the conference. Then you want to engage with your followers. When people sign up to follow you, don't just sit on top of Mount Olympus and impart wisdom. You really want to engage with those people. So especially think about if somebody helped you in building your brand. Do the same for other people. Reach out to people asking questions. If you've got 15 minutes, answer their questions and help them out. And this was a great quote from somebody saying, when you start out, make it a habit to connect at least with one person a day to offer to help. And then when you post, spark conversations about your posts and ask questions. What was the most important thing about this article, or discuss, so that you get people talking on your post, and that will help you with your reach. I'm almost finished here. You're going to want to be prolific, get people to hear from you. So this is what can be a little bit daunting. You can't post once a month and build your social brand. You have to be ubiquitous. So Facebook, a couple of times a day, you've got to update your status. Twitter, at least 3 times a day, unless you've got some, Shelby over there is breathing. We're going to call on Shelby later. But 3 times a day. Instagram, once a day. LinkedIn, once per weekday. Apparently nobody goes on weekends to LinkedIn. And when you post, the content has to be good, right? So, but again, it doesn't all have to be your content. The great thing about social media is that you can add value by sharing other people's good content. So this is just a representation about how you might think about how to get to those 3 posts a day or 5 posts a day, and looking at it over a week or a month. So again, think primarily about one platform. It's okay. The red is personal content. Like I said, it's okay to share personally occasionally. Then the green slice is original content. That's where you're really giving your opinions in a more in-depth way. But in-depth could still be 140 characters, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the bulk of your content can be stuff that you share. But when you share it, we're going to talk about how to curate that content so you're just not spewing somebody else's stuff. You're adding value so that people want to come back to you because they know you're sharing good stuff, and you're going to help them understand it better. So personal content, again, this is my Facebook page. If I talk about Noah, who's in the blue, then this is a few years ago, I have to talk about my other son, Ian, because I have to give them equal time. But this is an example of a post that I did that really walked the line for me from between just sharing a picture where the four of us all looked good. How often does that happen? With something that was really personal to me. This was during the conversations about Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. And that whole sort of discussion about, and I had a lot of friends who were really confused about All Lives Matter and why that was a bad thing to say that. They were posting on their Facebook page, All Lives Matter. And my friends thought that they thought that was the right thing to do, and I didn't want to just slam them and come into them. But so instead, I did a post, and I can't see that far, so I'm gonna. So this was at a wedding, and I wrote, "These are our sons. They both matter, but make no mistake, one is significantly more at risk to be harassed, arrested, or shot as a result of a routine traffic stop. And for too long, that hasn't mattered, and it needs to matter to us all." So again, a short statement. I was trying hard not to get in any particular friend's face, but just to say something that really, and I got a lot of thank you posts from people saying, I get it. So it can be, your personal brand can be a place where you can, really slide a comment in that can shift the conversation a little bit. So moving on to original content, it can take a number of different forms. A 140-character tweet that really is commenting on a current event and is your thought, that's original content. It doesn't have to be long. It can be a link to an article that you've written, again, promotion. And it can also be a how-to video that you create on your cell phone. I did my Ice Bucket Challenge, posted it. That was my how-to content. Here are some examples. This is my nephew, Sam Karn, who you saw earlier with my brother-in-law, Tim. He's wanting to position himself as a personal trainer. So he's doing his own challenge, 365 days of physical activities, posting Instagram things but this is a map of his run, and he's using his personal Facebook page to talk about his personal training to market himself to get people to hire him to be a personal trainer. This is another friend of mine who's an excellent writer. He's a freelance writer. Whenever he writes an article, he posts it to a number of different platforms, links to it. So this was an article on how artificial intelligence are going to help people live at home longer. And this is somebody who got published by an article, and what they did was they just thanked the Nonprofit Pro for publishing the article and gave a short synopsis of it. So if you've got a piece that you want to get out there, you want to, again, at who's ever publishing it, put it out there yourself. And this is another friend of mine who, she wrote content for 5 tips on how to selling your story on video. She produces videos for nonprofits. So she's giving you knowledge on how you can look better when you're being videoed for your job, but hopefully you're going to hire her to actually do the production. So again, that's great content to put out there, content that's going to help your audience, but again, only give them so much help that they don't have to not hire you to really get over the finish line. Curated content, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Curated content and sharing are not the same thing. Okay, really, this is, we've all felt sometimes that maybe there's a little bit too much information that people sharing about their personal or their professional lives. So if you're thinking about sharing something, ask yourself, is this going to inspire people? Is it going to educate them? Is it going to add value to their life? And bonus points for if you can add even more value by your commentary with that piece. So here are some examples of that. This is an article that somebody shared, and again, he just made a very short endorsement, a nice analysis of the destructive effect of the proposed Armed Anyone legislation. This is my writer friend, Randy Ryland, again. His posts do really well because he's a writer, and he writes really great short intros to read his another article. So this was about the recent dust-up between our president and the mayor of Pittsburgh. Randy's from Pittsburgh, so he feels passionately about this. But when alliteration trumps reality, you'll all probably remember the quote, I was elected to represent Pittsburgh, not Paris. So he was referencing back to that, so people got it. Usually you want to, explain a little bit, but if you're an expert, and if people are following you and they know that you're good, all you need to say is all of this. So this is somebody, and that's enough for her audience to know they want to read that article. And we also have somebody at our table who also has that kind of following as well. So Adam, posted something, and all he had to say was this. So that's just shorthand, where if your audience knows you, you don't have to say a lot, but what you're doing is you're giving it your personal brand of approval that this is valuable content that people should be reading. But here's another example of Adam's where he's referencing an article by Jonathan Turley at USA Today, but he's reminding us all of a similar incident and connected the dots between Trump's obstruction of justice being another version of locker room talk, and that sort of watering down of these really heinous things. Oh, it's not that bad. And then sometimes you have to say more when you curate. So think about the context. What's the best way to position yourself? And some platforms let you do that easily. Facebook, this is my preservation friend again talking about the Carnegie Building downtown. If you get a chance to go by it, it's a beautiful building, future home of an Apple store. And she's sharing an article about that. She started her commentary at the top, but as you can see here, see more. So some of the platforms allow you to start out and then write even more if you want in terms of your commentary. Facebook is another one. Adam shows us again how you can go long in Twitter. You only have 140 characters, but he wanted to say more about his summer reading list commentary. So he just did multiple tweets. If you're going to do this, make sure that your millennial son is not going to come in and want to talk to you about the latest episode of West Wing he just binged, because you're going to want to do them in some quick succession so that people will see them one after another. So it's a great tactic to use on Twitter, but just make sure that you can have enough time to get all three of them in there by stringing them together. And this was the original bonus points to Adam for retweeting a tweet about his original tweet. So he just kept the conversation going, which is a great thing to do. And then I'm going to just close by, if you only study one influencer, I don't think you could do any better than Robert Reich. When Linda first asked me about coming to speak with you today about this, it took me a while to figure out what I said, so you want me to talk? She goes, no, I want you to talk about, getting people to provide context and this and that. I was flying home from a work thing, and I was checking Facebook, and my son Noah shared a post from Robert Reich. We both follow him, and we were having an argument once about, Gloria Steinem dissing Bill Maher on, dissing women on Bill Maher, and we got into the whole thing about, the strategy of, could Hillary have done things differently to make things better? And I was saying, she was strategically wrong, and he was like, no, she was doing just the right thing for her base, and it made me really mad. And the next day he came to me and said, Mom, Robert Reich agrees with you. So I felt like I am vindicated. This influencer is making me appear smart in front of my son. But he's the king of long form and way beyond. He does video, he does everything. But he really goes into, and this is a post related to this article, which was by him. Again, bonus points for he's posting about an article that he wrote that was then featured on a website that he got to promote even more on his Facebook. So if you're going to follow anybody to learn how to do the context thing, he's a great one to follow. So I'm going to take a break now and call up. We're going to start with Lena, I think.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Oh, if that's okay
That's
with you.
fine by
All right.
me.
All right. So give me just one moment here. us a break from Facebook and Twitter and talk about podcasts.
Excellent. And I will probably preface this by saying that whenever I think about social media and your social media voice, it really should not be disjointed from who you actually are. So I think of this as more or less of finding your voice and how in which that your voice can be amplified through social media. So it's about presenting your more authentic self and so on. And so, I think you do have to cater a little bit to the platform you choose. So when I think about social media and the different platforms, I probably don't do things exactly like Dolores is suggesting that they do. But I do really want to think about the characteristics in anyone who has ever heard to talk to me about career, job search, whatever. I think of this very much in a very professional development kind of way. How do I want people to perceive me in the office, out on the street, at happy hour, also on social media? So I really do try to think of certain words where I want someone to think, when they think of Lena, what do they think of? And it shouldn't be different on social media as it is in the office, although everyone probably gets a different flavor of me depending on my mood or the day. Sorry. But I really like to think of this, and I think I want people to know that I am competent in at least some things. I tend to be relatively reliable. I want to be approachable. In my previous jobs, a lot of my work was something that was not something that everyone else had a lot of familiarity with. So how did I let myself be known that people could approach me and ask me questions? I happen to think I'm the funniest person I know, so which helps me to sort of keep myself entertained. So how can I try to present some of that? But I'm also want to, in all environments, especially on social media, think of when I have a voice and something maybe unique to consider, but when I should shut up and let somebody else do the talking. I think that's something that's really important to do. How do you lift up somebody? And that's an easy thing that you can sometimes do in retweeting. Sometimes it's not so easy. In the podcast, for example, how do you promote a voice that might not be sitting there talking? So you might have to be a little bit of a filter of that, or can you actually find that voice to be that original source and someone to promote? And I think that that is something that, as we're talking about our personal brand, you really do have to think of this more, in my opinion, as community building. How and which do you raise all voices for all the causes that you think about? So I'm a decently avid user of Twitter. I do a little bit more than cat gifs, but sometimes that's my favorite thing to do. And it's something where frequently we'll live tweet. So a lot of my work at ACS is obviously on judicial nominations. So sitting through the Gorsuch hearings, for example, I tweeted about things that the senators were asking that now Justice Gorsuch was answering. I also tweeted about my frozen yogurt habits and his pet goat. But I also use Instagram, but that I would say is more my closed, where you can see a lot about my cats and my nephews. LinkedIn is basically my resume. And Facebook, I actually don't use quite as frequently, but the one area obviously I'm talking about mostly right now is podcasts. So I will preface this by saying I did this in my personal capacity. So at ACS, we were in my day-to-day was very much engaged in the entire Supreme Court vacancy, the nominations battle, and so on. And so day-to-day, I was working with a number of the student chapters and lawyer chapters and trying to get programming together, working with Senate offices, identifying great scholars who might know something about, say, the Second Amendment and so on, to really go out there and talk about the advice and consent, the constitutional underpinnings of Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, and so on. But then this I did in my personal capacity, which meant I could say a few things that maybe I couldn't say necessarily in my professional capacity. So I've been on 2 podcasts, one more as a serial participant, and that's Advice and Consent. And then one, which this is going to get us an explicit tag, is called Law is My Ass, which is a podcast that a law professor does out of California, where he wanted to talk about judicial nominations. And so because I've done podcasts before, someone recommended that I be the person that they talk to about this. Obviously, when we think about audiences, these are very specific audiences. So Advice and Consent, we have nearly like 400 subscribers. It's a podcast that actually many years ago started by, and I wasn't there for this, by a group of lawyers who were at the Alliance for Justice, one of our partner organizations. And at the time, podcasts were just becoming a thing. So they wanted to really describe and deconstruct what was going on with the Alito and Roberts hearings and so on, and talk about it play by play. So this is not, I guess in some ways it's more like serial than some of these more weekly podcasts, in that there is hopefully a start and an end in terms of a confirmation process. There's a vacancy, then there's a confirmation. Sometimes it ends up being a lot longer than we think it should be. But I think that is something to somewhat know in thinking of your audience, as well as how long this might be. But when you're thinking about doing a podcast and a topic that you know about, I happen to know a lot about judicial nominations, but I certainly don't know everything. You know, not everyone can be Dahlia Lithwick when it comes to, you know, what they want to present and get out there. But I think I was very lucky to be able to fall into this. And I will say, so this particular podcast started pretty soon after Justice Scalia unexpectedly passed away. So this band of characters had come together and said, okay, now we have another vacancy. We want to do a podcast about it. And one thing I will say is that, but based on the work I do, it eventually got to me. Lena, will you do this? And I think that there were probably a few reasons why they picked me. And this is a great group of folks. So this is Dan Roth, who's one of our chapter leaders in the Bay Area, who had been one of the founders of our lawyer chapters out in Ohio. Tim Mooney, who does a number of different podcasts. He's also an ACS member. And Adam Shaw, also an ACS member and fan, who doesn't work on judicial nominations now, but they all have this somewhat background. But as one might be able to tell, I would probably be the only woman on this. But I actually really appreciated that they were trying to seek some sort of balance, seeking a different voice. Because I will say that is one thing that when I think of podcasts, I definitely want to make sure that there are a variety of perspectives. Obviously, that's not necessarily something that can be totally representative just because you happen to have a certain gender identity, but I do think it is something that I very much appreciated about them having that eye towards wanting to make sure that it wasn't just a bunch of bros sitting around talking or having that perception.
Plus, it was great for the audience because they could at least tell when you were speaking, this is who is speaking.
Yes, exactly. But beyond that, and I think I was actually very nervous that this podcast space with a bunch of guys meant I was going to get talked over. And this is a group...
We never do that.
No. Thanks, Adam, for proving that point. But I will say, like, there were a few things that we did that I think made sure that that wasn't the case and that we actually made space for each other. So one thing that we did on this podcast is we did it over Skype, which was awesome because like Dan's in LA, the rest of us were in DC, but we couldn't ever figure out time. So it was the most convenient way for us to convene and do this, and Tim did all the logistics of it. So occasionally there'd be a guest appearance by my cats, which was pretty awesome too. But only we could see it on Skype, so you might hear us sometimes giggle because like all of a sudden Scout's popping up into the like Skype window, but you can't quite see it. But it also did let us know because we could pick up cues. I'm about to stop, so whatever. But I actually have something to say. So I literally would raise my hand so that Tim, who facilitated this, would be like, okay, Lena has something to say again. So would be able to call on me. But it allowed us to not necessarily talk over each other and actually have a conversation, which I think was really, really beneficial. But I do want to give a lot of credit to Tim, who did a lot of the facilitating of this. Because I have to be honest, I actually thought I was only being asked to do this one time. It turned out to be, they wanted it to be weekly. And then we know that the certain Senate majority leader did not even allow for a hearing of President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland. So this podcast lasted actually 13 months and a total of 32 episodes. We eventually stopped doing it weekly. But what we were able to do was cover really intense content, such as the Senate Judiciary Committee questionnaire, ABA reviews, committee preparation, all about the committee hearing, questions. We got to talk a lot about the filibuster, cloture votes, floor debate, and so on. But because it lasted for so long, we also got to delve into some interesting areas, such as we could do a quick little review of the Supreme Court. What cases did they just hear? What's the impact of having only 8 justices on the Supreme Court? What do we think how that influenced the certain decisions that they had? We got to do sort of a deeper dive into previous nomination battles. So one of the reasons why I think I was actually inspired to go into the law was being a really dorky kid watching C-SPAN and watching the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings and watching Anita Hill. So that was the deep dive I wanted to do. And anyone who knows me, if I've never mentioned Anita Hill to you, it's probably actually probably unusual because I think I talk about her all the time. But it was a good opportunity for me to vent. It was a good opportunity, I think, for history lessons, so we weren't just looking at this particular nomination in isolation, and so on. And I think there's some examples. If you go here, you'll see some of we each picked a different confirmation hearing series, but there's video embedded or an audio embedded, and it was a really good way to technically go back in history and deconstruct and make some relevant applications to today. But what I really loved doing about it is that I got to talk with 3 other people who had different perspectives. Similar mindset, relatively progressive lawyers, but we all offered something a little bit different. So for example, Adam Shaw is a rules genius when it comes to Senate rules. Like, he knows everything about it. So if you ever listen to the podcast, he's the one that would do this really intense dive. Tim is a fantastic facilitator, pulls out all the threads, I think could summarize things and move things along really, really well, and he could pick up the trends that we were all doing. And Dan was great because he was a West Coaster outside of the Beltway, and he was definitely offering some more interesting perspectives, usually offering his love for Dahlia Lithwick and a way to promote her articles and her content and bringing that out. And I was probably the character who would constantly be relentlessly talking about process, norms. I was the one who, this is part of my day job, so I could take what I was doing the day and apply it. So here's what each senator said in the committee hearing, and could do that. But I routinely pivoted to talking about lower courts and lower court nominations because that was certainly something that's also a big priority. While I thought I had this audience who was really excited about the Supreme Court vacancy, it was my chance to bring them in and say, okay, you care about those 9 justices who sit up there, but what about those 870 other judges, or actually, let's take it, 861 other federal court Article III judges where there are a significant number of vacancies that we also need to be caring about because those are the judges who are actually making the decisions that most impact our daily lives. Clearly, I'm making a pitch for that right now, too. And so I think that that's pretty interesting. And actually, if you want to quick pull up the audio clip, I'll quickly go into that because I do think that was one way in which I got to pivot and
Or be followed anymore. But we've heard some chatter, for lack of a better word, that the GOP-controlled Senate is going to be dropping the norm of blue slips for lower court judges. And we've talked about blue slips before. Actually, I think I'm going to actually pitch it to you, Lena, not only to talk about this, but also to just sort of explain what this whole blue slip process is relative to nominees and home state senators and all of that. So why don't you just kind of take it from here?
Well, I so appreciate an opportunity to talk about lower courts. Supreme Court justices do not have an opportunity to have a blue slip because they technically don't belong to a state, and so there's no home state senator. For all the other courts that have jurisdictions that fall within any of the states that have representation, there are things called blue slips, and it's actually a literal blue slip that the Senate Judiciary Committee chair hands to the home state senators for them to fill out to say that they approve or disapprove of a specific nominee. And that nominee is someone who would then sit on the bench in one of the courthouses in that particular senator's state. So these home state senators, as we call them, have a significant...
So the blue slips are something I care a lot about. This was an opportunity for me to use this long-form opportunity to go on and explain this very weird tradition, norm that we don't normally get to talk about. And so that was one way that I think I could insert relevant, hopefully relatively timely information. We were routinely talking about news of the day and so on. but a way for me to slip in this very specific tidbit into an audience that might not know about blue slips. I do think that this is a very legally minded audience, but even then I know amongst lawyers, we don't necessarily know a lot about the Senate history, tradition, nominations process. So the other thing that I really loved about doing is that I could learn a lot. The interaction really helped me hone my message. We would prepare show notes ahead of time. Sometimes that would take me 5 minutes. Sometimes that would take me, like when I was prepping for the Justice Thomas confirmation hearing podcast, 6 hours or more, because I decided to watch Confirmation, the HBO movie. So I wanted to make sure I was somewhat prepared as possible, but also make it relatively conversational. But I learned a lot by listening to Adam, to Tim, to Dan, to reading some of the articles that they wanted to reference as well. And then the other thing, which is the next thing that I loved, is that we got listener mail. The fact that anyone was even listening to this podcast was kind of amazing. Although I was doing my day job, someone had come into a hearing room and they were like, "Oh, I was just listening to you." And I was like, What were you talking about? They're like, "Oh yeah, I downloaded your podcast for the airplane ride." And like that was really impressive. But really cool is like we would get, and the podcast was promoted on different social media channels, and there were opportunities to comment and send email and so on, something that we encourage people to do. And here's somebody who sent us an email from a relatively conservative, self-described conservative listener who wanted to engage with us. And this was an awesome opportunity. Now, he thought I might be lying about something, so I took a little bit of issue with that, and my co-podcasters helped defend me, but he thought I had mentioned that I wanted Merrick Garland to at least have a hearing and a confirmation vote, and if the Republicans really didn't like him, to vote him down. They didn't think I was serious. I was serious. I wouldn't have liked the outcome necessarily, but I was serious about wanting that process. And that interaction gave me an opportunity to, one, obviously defend my honesty and my integrity, although it really wasn't quite in question. I'm sure it was a little bit in jest. But also to explain more so what I meant. And that's not something you can sometimes do on Twitter when someone's like, "No, that's not true." No, it's true. But it gave me a deeper opportunity to do that, and I really liked that. But it was a way, obviously, to connect with these other folks as well. But how did it promote ACS? And so, as I said, I did this in my personal capacity. Usually, we would record at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday night, and I'd have to rush one time on a Saturday night because that's how awesome we are with our social lives. But I think it was an opportunity for me to take messages, to take what I understood in my day job and broadcast it, translate it for a different audience, which I thought was really helpful. But it also helped me hone what wasn't working, what didn't feel like it was resonating, what needed to be described more, and it helped me do that. It also helped me just listen. I got to hear from Dan, Tim, and Adam, who weren't doing this on the day-to-day, but who had that perspective. So I learned a lot. But also, like one of my co-podcasters actually wrote then a blog for ACS, which I thought was really helpful, a way in which we could talk about the blog and so on. How did it promote me? I'm not exactly sure, except I'm here right now. But I'm much more comfortable saying yes to things like this. I talk really fast, so I'm actually surprised anybody wants to record me sometimes. But it was a real opportunity for me to deeply dive into something I'm very comfortable with talking about. Although sometimes I'm comfortable talking about things I don't know about also. But it let me become a little bit more of an expert in this area, talk to others, and have that interaction in a way that wasn't someone at the normal coalition table I'm sitting at. And it led to me doing another podcast and being a guest podcaster on that Law Is My Ass one. And then my friends, when the Politically Reactive podcast, I think many of you probably know, they were talking about the Supreme Court process, and they were like, it would be really fascinating to talk to somebody about this. Some of my friends were like, you should talk to Lena. She does a podcast on this, which they have not yet called. So, Hari, I'm looking at you. But the big important lessons, I think, obviously I can go on. You should prepare ahead of time. Try to hone in on what your messages are. Timing, I think, in terms of releasing a podcast, it's helpful to be predictable, to do it on every Monday so people know that on their Tuesday commute they're listening to you. We didn't have that benefit quite so much because we were all doing this whenever we possibly could. Someone had to, the bedtime, putting their kids to bed at night, like all of a sudden went haywire, so we had to bump it to the next day or whatever happened to be. We weren't quite that reliable. Resources that you need with podcasts. I actually think you can do this very lo-fi, maybe. Tim had all of the I don't know, the tools to make it relatively high quality, but we were sitting there on Skype with, I had my earphones in, so the quality improved, although you could probably tell when I lost my earphones and had to be on speakerphone depending on the quality of the podcast. But it was pretty easy to do. A decently good editor, so sometimes someone would go off the rails and Tim was like, that was not appropriate. So would cut that, or Scout would come in and we would all like laugh because she just knocked over my glass of water or whatever it would happen to be, and that got to be edited out. But because we were all in different places, and I do think geographic diversity, it also makes it easier, is helpful. Skype was a really helpful thing to use, as I mentioned. Just raise my hand so I could create space to talk and also respect somebody else's space as they were talking. And then in the promotion of it, so we have a Facebook page, there's a Twitter feed, it actually has its own website, scotuscast.com, where people could post things. This was the way that we could echo that sort of some of the news articles that we were talking about, or to have conversations, or to retweet, or to post something there and promote ourselves on these different channels. And it was also really great because our audience was a bunch of lawyers that we would regularly let SCOTUS blog know. So we would often be included in their recaps. Usually when we did that, it was a great bump to us. We also let, and the ACS releases a weekly bulletin. So for those of you who are writing op-eds, writing blog posts, doing podcasts, letting us know so we can amplify it there, as well as our blog, ACS blog. I think those are the opportunities that you have to create sort of another microphone for whatever that you're doing. I think that's it.
Great, thank you, Lena. My podcast, I listen to the West Wing Weekly. Any other, yeah, do you have a pin? No, I don't. Not yet, no, me either. So, no, it's interesting. See, I was at a Memorial Day barbecue and it sort of came up somehow and somebody said, so yeah, but that's I'm a listener, so it was really great to sort of have the curtain peeled back a little bit and hear about what it's like to do it from your Skype. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam and let him talk give us a little more about his Twitter journey.
Okay, well, I'm actually not going to talk much about my Twitter journey at all, actually. Okay. I'm going to talk about using Twitter and using it effectively and building your audience and building your brand along the lines of more sort of helpful advice rather than my story. Because my story on Twitter is actually not that interesting, in part because I find Twitter to be, I'm very conflicted about my use of Twitter. The thing about Twitter is that you'll find if you want to be successful at it, and I think with all the social media, it takes constancy. Consistency, constancy, engagement, constant. Just you got to be doing it all the time. And I'll just one slight disagreement. Dolores' presentation, I've agreed with everything. The one thing I disagree with, if you're sending 3 tweets out a day, you are not going to build a brand. You are not going to build followers. You need to be tweeting a lot more than that. In my view. In my view, you need to be a lot more active than that. So I'll talk a couple of things that I think about in terms of Twitter. In terms of if you want to figure out how to be on Twitter, ask yourself, who do you like to follow? And why do you like to follow them? Because other people will want to follow you if you are like them. Now, I don't think you have to figure out, I like following The Onion, right? But I can't be The Onion. I'm not going to be that funny. That's not my skill set. So I like following that. But that's not going to be me, right? That's not going to be what I can offer, right? So there's other people that you like to follow that you can't model yourself on, but there are the Robert Reichs, the George Takei, where they're doing maybe things that are similar to what you're doing. So think about how they're using it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Look at how they're using it and try to think about how you can do the same. One thing I think you'll see if you see someone like George Takei or Robert Reich is there's a lot of tweets. So when you saw the page from George Takei, he had 24,000 tweets. Mm-hmm. You get 24,000 tweets, you know, that's how many, if you do 3 a day, how many are you getting at? You're not getting there, right? You got to get there. You got to be really active and really on it. Now, so what that means is that in thinking about using Twitter, and I think most of these social media, you have to take it out of the mindset of being sort of transactional and move it into the world of institutional. So what do I mean by that? Right now, like while I'm here at this conference, I'm not really tweeting much, right? So maybe I'll pick up my phone, I'll scroll through, oh, there's an interesting tweet, I'm going to retweet that. That's what I think is transactional tweeting. Just at this one time, I decided to tweet. That's not going to build my followers. I built my followers by being institutional and structural, saying, okay, I'm going to tweet 15 to 20 times today. It was getting up in the morning a little bit early, 20 minutes early, scheduling tweets to come out during the day. Right? There are tweet schedulers you can use. That's not the exclusive way you should tweet, but it's part of your overall tweeting strategy. So I would look at the morning news and the morning Twitter feed and say, let me find 10 stories that I want to tweet on or respond to or some way. I'm not going to send them all out at 6:30 in the morning while I'm here drinking my coffee, right? Because that's going to waste them, right? I want to spread them out over the course of the day so that they can I can engage in interaction. And then what I would often do during the day when I would be more transactional is like go back to my Twitter. I was like, oh, I've got something coming out. I would send it like at 11 o'clock on the hour, or 11:30 or whatnot. And I might post 2 or 3 at that time, right? I might early on schedule, okay, here's some newspaper article. I'm going to give like 2 or 3 comments about that article too, all scheduled to come out around between 11 and 11:05 or something like that. And then I would say, at 11:15, I'd say to myself, I'm going to go back and look. Is there anyone interacting with it? And then I'd transactionally, I'd kind of interact with them, tweet them back or respond or something like, and use those as a basis for forming conversations and discussions. I think if you make it institutional, if you do it every day, if you have an agenda for what you're doing, if you put a structure in place and like send out these tweets every morning or however you want to do it, it's going to be a much more successful effort for you. It's also, frankly, a much more exhausting effort for you, and you have to be frank about what that is. I think I did a really good job building a big Twitter follower, and then I kind of burnt out a little bit, right? I realized my personality wasn't someone who wanted to be on Twitter all day tweeting all the time. But if you want to build a big brand through Twitter, you want to be that kind of person. You can build a smaller brand if you don't do it as much. I think that's kind of what I'm doing. But I think my brand could be a lot bigger if I was just willing to really put the time in. And so I think it is really about making it institutionalized structures for tweeting rather than just sort of doing it offhand. And in terms of things like engagement, I think the people who gain followers on Twitter are people who are opinionated or who offer unusual or different perspectives. And so part of your Twitter persona, I don't think it should be exclusive. Every tweet should not be an original idea necessarily, because you won't get 15 to 20 of those a day. I wish I had 15 to 20. I got 15 to 20 original ideas in a month, I'm happy, right? So you're not going to get those in a day, right? So but part of it has to be original and opinionated. And when I look back and I think about where are the tweets that I have the most success with, that built me the most followers, that got the most retweets and whatnot, it was when I was most opinionated or offering a perspective that hadn't been offered, such as maybe an immediate reaction when some legal story came out and I was like the first person to say, that's obstruction of justice for Trump or something. That's not a real example. But like if you're right on that early case, and so I would so for me, I follow the Supreme Court really, really closely. So like when the Supreme Court's issuing opinions, like on same-sex marriage, I had really good reactions. I had tweets out there right away. A lot of other people were doing it too, but it was a thing that people were interested in talking about.
So I could retweet it later, right?
Yeah. Just don't talk over me. No. You can absolutely. I'm just teasing from the last
I know.
But so you want to be opinionated or offer unusual information. Also, in terms of engagement, you engage people by being opinionated and offer different perspective as part of your overall package and persona on Twitter. One thing you want to do in terms of engagement is you want to find ways, and when we say what is engagement, engagement is also interacting with people. One of the things that people want on Twitter is they want to be able to respond to you and hear your response. Like there's a back and forth. It's not a performance, right? It's not your Twitter performance. You put it out there. And so you want to have some back and forth on a regular basis. And what I would do is I would always think about who I want to have a back and forth with, right? My time is pretty valuable, right? So do I want to have the back and forth with the person who's got 5 followers and no picture on his Twitter feed? No, that's not going to be worth my time. I'm not going to gain too many followers unless the person's making a really interesting point and I think that my readers will be interested in my response in some way. But I think about it, What I'll rather do is, because I'm in the Supreme Court space, I'll take people who have a lot of followers and I'll try to engage them. Like, oh, you made this point, what about this? Or here's how you're wrong, or something like that. Sometimes they don't pay attention to you, and sometimes they do pay attention to you. But when you get in a debate with some major figure on Twitter, you're going to find you're going to get a lot more followers. And by the way, it's not just engaging and arguing with people, it's also complimenting people. And sometimes, by the way, because, and I think Dolores is so right, we're all just people too. We're not Twitter feeds, we are people and we respond. What you find is if you do engage and disagree with people, you'll get in arguments, and arguments create bad energy for you and bad vibes for them, and part of that's good for branding and like creating some energy. But it can also be good to reach out to someone you've had a disagreement with on Twitter and say, hey, I just want to let you know that wasn't personal, that, I respect your work and something. This actually happened to me. There's a guy on Twitter who I was following, and he's made some things and said some comments, and I got engaged in a debate. And then he made a comment that sort of made it clear to me on the Twitter that he thought that I had disrespected him in some way. And so I just DM'd him. I didn't know the guy, I'd never met him. We'd only had this Twitter debate. And I said, hey, I just want to let you know that I thought we were just totally disagreeing on substance, and that I have no desire to diss you as a person. You seem like you're really smart. And that guy retweets everything I send him all the time. He disagrees with me on almost everything, but he's retweeting everything, and he's got a lot of followers. Why? Because I was like, hey, I'm a person, like I wasn't trying to hurt your feeling, like that's like we're trying to keep it on the up and up. At the same time, so you can sort of leverage those interactions with people. In terms of retweeting, I think I would probably just agree a lot with what Dolores said. I often think that people make the mistake of retweeting something because they think the link, so like you're retweeting an article, they think it's a good article, and so they retweet it. I think it's more important to retweet a good tweet rather than a good article. Now, the good tweet could be a link to an article, but if the tweet is, oh, this is a thoughtful analysis of something, I worry it's like someone going to say, oh, I'm really dying for a thoughtful analysis of something, right? No, right? But if the tweet is, I don't know, whatever the thoughtful point is, and made the point in the tweet, then you retweet that. That's a better retweet, right? Because someone wants to read what you've tweeted, and they're going to retweet it back. I also think, though, that's one way, and sort of you retweet and use it to sort of add value, maybe add your own comments to it or whatnot. But I do think that one of the things you want to also think about retweeting as a progressive lawyer is think about retweeting also as a form of activism, as a form of mobilization, as a form of advocacy, of adding your voice to important and progressive causes. So right now, I'm like really focusing on retweeting almost everything I see about the emoluments clause, right? Because I think that's a really important issue. I think it's not getting enough attention. I think it's the kind of issue that's bipartisan. I think it's the kind of issue that deals with really questions of government ethics that are really broad and interesting. So I'm retweeting like that stuff all the time. I always want to be retweeting that. In part, not because I think that I'm going to gain followers from retweeting the emolument stuff. It's because I want more people, I want everyone who's following me to be thinking about the emoluments clause more often. So part of why I retweet too is not just for me and to promote me, but also to promote these causes and to be part of a voice and part of mobilization. More generally. So you can add value with your tweets, with your own perspective and your own ideas. You got to have some tweets like that. But some of your tweets and retweets should also be about adding your voice, right? Just adding one more voice to a chorus of voices about a particular issue or whatnot. So those are some of my overall ideas, and obviously love to answer questions and stuff.
Well said. Yeah, I'm going to open it up now, too. Yeah.
I'm curious, so when you retweet somebody, then there's an at something. But when you're just tweeting your 10, 20 a day, do you just do an at, or is it just you?
Do I do an ad? No, I'll just tweet out to the world, and to a particular person. I'm looking to communicate to a large number of people. So, I don't know, Dolores, you have something you want to?
Well, so there's, the Twitter platform itself, and again, Adam, Facebook is my vehicle and email is my real vehicle, but you would just go to your personal Twitter page and put in your posts or schedule them. So when you sign up for Twitter,
Right.
yeah,
I do.
yeah, okay.
And that just goes out there to people who are following. So then all the time I'm getting someone is now following me. And I don't know how they found out about me, what that means. Are they suddenly on a special list, or that gets the tweets? What does that mean when you hear that somebody's following you?
Basically, that means every time you tweet, it will show up in their feed.
In their feed, but otherwise, is it showing up in other people's tweets too, or just
only the people who are following you, unless those people who are following you retweet you to the people they're following to. Right.
So how do you get people to retweet you? Like, if you send something to ACS, will they retweet it?
If it's good enough. So that's why, you really want to think about your content.
Who decides
So,
that? Who do you send it to?
The owner
You.
of that Twitter feed. So they're monitoring, ACS is monitoring their feed, seeing what comes through, and making a determination that, wow, this is something we think is worthy of being seen by all of our followers. And so then they retweet it, and that's how it gets out there.
Just to follow up, because I'm a journalist and
Yeah.
follow. So I put it out there, it's just the people who are following me, but suddenly I get people who say they're going to follow me, so how did they hear about it?
Well, somebody who followed you said, this is great. They retweeted, when they retweet, it retweets to all the people following them.
Right.
So it's sort of Kevin Bacon's 7 degrees of separation. So, Molly follows you, she loves your tweet, she retweets it, so all of Molly's followers see it. One of them says, wow, that's really smart. I want to get stuff from her directly, not just through Molly. So then they make a conscious choice to follow you as a result of somebody retweeting what you did. Any other questions? I want to, yeah, go ahead, Shelby.
Okay, so we since the sit-in in the Senate and they were streaming with Periscope, we've heard in some places it might be a good idea to stream our events on Periscope or something like that. I mean, what are the? I feel like there's going to be some drawbacks there, and it's going to take some setting up as well. And then I guess part of that too is you also have like micro live streaming situations on Snapchat. So tell me your feelings about Periscope and Snapchat.
Can I?
Yes,
Snapchat is
please.
horrible.
I think so. I don't know that Periscope, and I'm looking at people who probably know more, but Facebook Live is also something that I feel like is probably even easier to use as a student chapter leader or so on. So, for example, like if you wanted to say like you really want to increase your audience and engagement, do it on Facebook Live. The thing is, it lives there. It's not like then disappear. Probably the Snapchat small things. That can be
Instagram
cute. That's
stories,
probably,
yeah.
a little bit more personally engaging. That's my preference for using. I don't use Snapchat well, as everyone who's had to train me on it 400 times knows. But I think that that's the opportunity to make it slightly smaller. Maybe I think of it as funnier and so on. So Facebook Live probably more for the professional things that you want to increase your audience, and it still archives it. The other thing too, like if you're doing this through ACS and you want someone to know about what you're doing, let them know you're doing that in advance. Because then they can amplify it, they can retweet it, they can direct you to doing that. So you're not doing this alone. Let people know when you're thinking of doing this. Or, hey, I'm about to go on a Twitter spree, or I'm about to do this blog. The other thing, too, like if you are doing blogs, say we would love for you to do it for ACS blog, but say you have it on, you do a Huffington Post article or another article. There are certain outlets that there's an exclusivity thing there, but usually after 2 weeks it goes away. We can do cross-posting. That's another way for you 2 weeks later to get a bump in whatever it is that you've put out, or immediately. It's a great way to amplify. So those ACS chapter leaders and members, let us know when you're doing these things or when you're thinking about doing these things, and we can help connect you with the other outlets and resources in order to amplify that.
And
so,
Leah, when you say us, to talk over you,
yep.
is there a particular us at ACS that people should connect with?
Yeah, pretty much. If you're a student leader chapter, I would probably go to the person who works with the director of student chapters, and they'll be in touch with our communications department. That's probably the best way to do it, or lawyer chapter and so on. Probably just the ACS staff member you know and love who will help make you direct. But it will ultimately be coordinated by our communications department, and so eventually whoever you're contact with there will try to vet that and make sure that your resources are most appropriate to whatever your need is. And those student chapter, lawyer chapter staff, they're thinking through all the different platforms that we have, whether it be our blog posts, recording, having a lot of our events we turn into podcasts and videos later too, so ways in which we can promote that. The other thing I will say is we get to, here at convention, someone makes reference to a study we've done or a blog post that somebody else wrote. It's a great way for us to 4 months later reference it and keep it somewhat fresh or refresh it too. So those are the types of things that we love it when you give us this content that we can continue to use over the course of time, but we need to sometimes know that you're doing it.
Okay, we've entered into the
No.
workshop phase, so I'm gonna ask the group what we can have. This is a really rich discussion, and we can keep doing this. The workshop is, we're gonna send you to the ACS blog and have you read one of the posts that are up there now and do some thinking. You can talk with your neighbors if you want. How would I share this? How would I position it? Would I do a Facebook post because that's my, or what would the 3 tweets that I would set up to give context for this? So I want to throw it open to the group to see which you feel would be most helpful to you. Do we want to just have more ask questions, talk about things, or do you want to go ahead and go to the blog and do a little workshop?
And we could also, I think, like if you had questions about how you might think about your strategy,
Yep.
We can sort of
Yeah.
more hands-on. Steve raised some issues about his particular project, and I think
Yeah.
that we could probably spend 2 or 3 minutes on different people if you have a goal or a thinking what you want, how you want to use it. If there's some way that we can provide
So
that.
we've got a hand up here, and we had a hand up here too, so
Okay.
I think it sounds like we're just gonna talk more, right? Yeah, great, okay, let's go, yeah.
So this might be kind of a lazy question, but you were saying, Professor Winkler, that you get your tweets and then you put them out throughout the day. I've done more like institutional Facebook groups, or Facebook pages, and had what I thought was like a really great post, and what I thought was, and it didn't get like following or any kind of reactions, and it turns out there's like times of the day apparently that it's just not optimal for putting stuff out there. I was wondering if y'all had any kind of
Yeah, there are a couple of things about Facebook, and part of it is that Facebook is now all about monetizing Facebook. So, they're even if you're really looking to build a personal brand and really build a brand and get a following on Facebook, you do want to think about possibly some sponsored posts and paying a little bit of money. The dirty secret in Facebook is even your friends and family are only seeing 15-20% of your posts. They don't see them all because there's so much, and Facebook is trying to drive you to and Facebook is also looking now at really giving preference to family and friends as well too, because there are so many companies now who are posting. So a few things, pictures and videos get shared more, but there's also this backlash now. I think you've seen, copy and paste this into your post. Don't just share it, because people are figuring out how to attack the Facebook algorithm. So if there's something you really want shared, again, you might want to tell people, could you copy and paste this into your post, your friends to do it. That will highlight it more. Having one, there was, I don't know if Facebook's figured this out, but when photos first became big, there are agencies that study reach. What's your reach? How many people have seen this post? And they found out that if you do a photo album with 2 or 3 photos, the reach bounced way up. More people saw it because they had tricked the Facebook algorithm. So you need to actually check in Facebook. You can look and see who's reading your posts. But again, a lot of it is how good is your content. I don't think it's as much about time of day as it is, as Adam said, if it's something that really speaks to your passion and speaks to your audience, what's going to get your post seen is other people sharing it. It's going to raise it with their audiences, but it's also going to raise it even within your own audience. So really think about the content. And there's nothing to say that you can't post something multiple times as well too, because in that time of day, sometimes people will see it, it'll be way down in their feed, or they'll see it the second time that you post it.
That's a good point, because you got to remember. You think, I don't want to say the same thing twice, and you don't want to say the exact same thing twice. I sometimes change it up a little bit. But there's a lot of people. If you're on over the course of the day, you'll see people sending the same thing sometimes, especially brands and companies. They do that more. In terms of time, I do think timing can matter a little bit. Obviously, there's nothing going to replace or substitute for the quality of the inside or whatnot. But I know when I first started using it, I paid a little bit more attention. If you do some research online, you can find some metrics. There are data out there about when people are using these various platforms. Posting on LinkedIn. I'm not a big LinkedIn user. I mean, I have like 1 million connections, and I've never posted it or looked at it. Thankfully, because I'm not looking for a job. But I know that's not your situations, most of you, so go use it. But I know, like you said, don't use it on the weekend, because if you can post a great post on there, but if no one's seeing it. And the same thing, I'm a West Coaster. I live in California and Los Angeles. So when I first started tweeting, I had to realize, like, oh, my hours for tweeting might be a little bit different, because when I'm, that time I kind of, like, I would like to tweet at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm sort of winding down and don't want to actually do any more work, But that was a bad time to tweet if you look at the data. Like, the data is just the people on the East Coast are not on Twitter at that point. So I'm sending out dead tweets, and sometimes I'll transactionally tweet at 11:30 at night from California. Like, why am I bothering, I should just schedule that tweet to come out in the morning at 6 o'clock, right? And then someone's going to see it rather than no. So I don't think timing's totally irrelevant.
Right.
I do think it's part of the calculus of things that you want to think about. And there are data out there about, you can see the best time to, when are the most users on Twitter on Monday? And it's a certain number of hours, and Tuesday, and you'll find that it's dead on the weekend. Even Twitter, by the way, the Twitter numbers go down drastically on the weekend. So it's just, there are data that you can use.
And there are tools, Hootsuite, there's, again, if you Google, you can see there are tools, some of them free, some of them very inexpensive, that you can do that scheduling with it too, that will help you.
Oh, yeah.
And they will also give you some data about their audience, they'll often tell you these are the best times to tweet. And then sometimes you might want to counter program against that, because, everybody's, in the email world, we always schedule it to arrive in the inbox at 9 a.m. And then, you've sat there at your computer, right? You start working at 8:45, then all of a sudden at 9 you hear ding, 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 ding. And, maybe the person who scheduled at 8:55 is going to, get the eyeballs, or somebody who does it at 9:15 because it's going to be at the top of their feed because they were getting their coffee and having their real conversations by the water cooler from 9 to 9:15. So the best thing you can do too is take a look at your posts, see what are getting shared the most and what are getting the most engagement, and do that analysis of, are they all happening around the same time, or is it certain kinds of posts get more shares?
And can I make one point, and this is a broader point, is that generally speaking in advocacy, if you're trying to make a point, if you're talking about whatever issue it is that you care about, you might have said it once, twice, 10 times, but in order for you to actually create dialogue, make a point, and sustain it, you are going to be so sick of hearing yourself talk about it at a certain point. So I talk about the lower courts ad nauseum. But I know I'm talking to different audiences, whether it be the time of day, the platform I'm using, and so on. And so get sick of hearing yourself say something that's really important.
Yeah, and that's part of it too, is finding your passion. Whatever you want your persona is, or you want to tweet about, or have social media, it has to be something you're passionate about, because it is that constancy. And if it's passionate, you'll keep focused on it, and people will catch that.
Yeah.
Let's see in the back there, yeah, and then we'll go to you.
I want to suggest that for next year, I'm lucky enough to be here, that you have a separate session on this general subject for people over 70. Now, I think Texas probably knows all this stuff, because he probably has to do it for his law practice. But I left law practice before tweeting was invented. My children know all about it, my grandchildren know all about it, but I feel like I'm on a different planet in this discussion. My whole
Mhm.
I don't know what that's subjecting me to. I don't, do Facebook. My 4-year-old, 5-year-old grandson likes to call me on what we call facelift.
Mhm.
But, other than that, you know, this, I don't understand the function, especially Adam, you know, do you have a job?
Not really.
It sounds like it takes a good part of your day. It
Well,
takes
it-
me
Mhm.
15 minutes in the morning to go through all the junk mail I get.
Mhm.
Now, my son-in-law, who's in the business, has told me that a part of that reason is that I still have AOL mail.
Mhm.
And if I switch to something else, I
Right.
won't get as much junk.
I'll
But
tell
that's,
you,
you know,
as a fundraiser, you're very valuable. The AOL.com addresses are the most philanthropic of all email addresses. And this was a study done actually during the last election. Political donors were much more they said this is who we want to send our emails to, AOL. And I always say it's because, they're people of a certain age who but they were early adopters when they got on. So they're not, people think of AOL subscribers as Luddites, right? That was my first email address, was AOL. But the people who stayed with AOL and who are still on it, many of them are very tech savvy, but they also have disposable income. They're of a certain age and they're donors. So don't diss AOL subscribers. But your point's a really good one in terms of you have to have your comfort level with privacy and with, who's going to be sharing your brand and what are they going to be saying about you. So, a lot of people, they're on Facebook only. You can set Facebook so that only the people that you choose can see your posts. And, it's good to sit down with your grandkids and have them talk you through it and be just really honest with them. This is what I want to get out of it. And they're the ones who are going to be able to help you set it up in a way to do that. My husband is an architect, brilliant guy, not really a tech guy. And also very concerned about privacy and frankly, very concerned he's going to be taken advantage of. I mean, he gets and so he was a late addition to Facebook, relatively late. And I remember the night that he got on, it was a bad night. I always was very clear that I never talked about my husband on Facebook. I was just never going to go personal that way and complain about him. One night I came home and our older son, Ian, who was still pretty young at that point, he was like 12 or something. I came home from a meeting and nobody was home, and so I turned on the lights. A little while later, Noah and Jamie came home, and I said, well, where's Ian? He said, oh, we had a fight and he left. And I had a big presentation like the next day, and I really needed to be working. But, like you're a mom, your 12-year-old, it's 11 o'clock, and he's not home. And so you feel really bad, like I can't work, even though I can't find him. But so in frustration, I went on Facebook, and I actually wrote, how does a 47-year-old lose a 12-year-old? I mean, that was it. That was my post, and it was the first time. And about 15 minutes later, my husband called from upstairs. He goes, hey, honey, I finally got on Facebook. And I was like, oh, damn, because, the first time I talked to him, the very first time, 20 minutes, Ian had come home by this time, and he was fine. Everything was great. But 20 minutes later, my husband said, all these people want to be my friend. What does that mean? Am I going to have to, talk to them constantly? He's also an extreme introvert, too. And I said, honey, Facebook is fine. You can be just as antisocial in Facebook as you are in real life. So he looks occasionally, and he relies on me to tell him what's going on with his family because I'm friends with them on Facebook. So there are a lot of opportunities to limit or expand your social media participation, and I really do think the best people to help you figure that out are your grandkids, because they'll listen to you and they'll tweak the experience so that you see some of their posts and not all of them, because you don't want to see all their posts either. So yeah, in the back.
Yeah, my question is about, we're going to try and use Facebook and Twitter more for a chapter to get just a better presence on campus and all those things. And one of the things we want to do is have multiple contributors within the ACS group. And so I know all this was created by, I think, for that, but is there any other things you would say when you are kind of trying to source your content from multiple law students with, obviously you guys are all busy as well, and so were there other strategies with scheduling?
I'd love to throw this open to any chapter people. Shelby, I know that you're just sort of did you say?
We've had Facebook for a while.
Mhm.
We're just working on Twitter.
Shelby's from the Atlanta, tell us your, yeah.
I'm the president for the Georgia State University chapter. I mean, we do have multiple contributors on our like page for Facebook. I'm currently the only one on Twitter, just because it's brand new. But we use our Facebook mostly for event notifications in the past, and so now we're moving to a point where we're doing a little bit more like advocacy and I'm sharing a lot of ACS blog posts as well from the from the blog, and then like adding a little bit to talk about our own opinion and then post that. I have a lot of posts that I have from convention that only I can post because I'm the only one here from my chapter. But I also have I've talked to my other board members about like, all right, so when we post, here are the ground rules, like we're nonpartisan, so you can't go after a politician. It has to be professional, spell check everything. And then I have two other people on my board who are like designated to help me with that. And so we kind of just cycle through the week and have a couple posts a week about at different times about who's going to do what. But it's definitely doable as long as like everybody's on the same page and like you sit down and talk about it. Like, all right, here's the ground rules. So I don't know if that helps. But.
I think so. And
Yeah.
some of the things that you might also think about too is not just retweeting ACS stuff, but think about what are the allied organizations on your campus that we want to build coalitions as part of our coalition partners. Whether it's identity groups or other things like that. Retweeting their stuff, the interests of those organizations, because they're part of our overall, the big tent that we want to be at American Constitution Society. So don't feel like it's only ACS stuff you should be retweeting, but think about retweeting stuff that's appealing to other groups in there. And if you have multiple people who are posting, I think one of the ways to do it and get them to keep doing it, because that's really, I think, the challenge. It's really easy for people to say, oh, I'll tweet. And so the challenge to get them to do it is sit down with each of the people who are going to be doing it and say, what are you really fascinated? What are you really passionate about in the ACS world? Oh, I'm access to justice. Well, why don't you tweet often as much as you can about access to justice issues for our Twitter feed? Not tweet anything, but focus on the things that are interested in you. You love free speech, campaign finance law, whatever. Go tweet about that. Like, you might give people more of a mission that ties to their own passion rather than, because I find over the course of the year, the obligations to ACS among people other than the very, very top of the chapter tend to minimize, because they get other interests. And so one of the ways to do it is give them something they want to be doing.
Other organizations, your professors and ACS scholars too, promote them as well. They produce content often.
And your school is a really good one. If you don't follow like your school, your law school, we have like a law library feed, and you follow all those people and then retweet them, and it's all so the people who are seeing that's actually like all of the students, and so people that you're like gonna recruit for your chapter, people that are coming to your events, and so like even as like wonky as some of the school social media can be sometimes, it's good just to be there and engaging with those posts because that's exactly who you're like who's gonna see your stuff.
Linda, yeah.
I was just going to say, having started a bunch of social media platforms at various jobs, I can say I kind of have this formula that I follow. So you can ease into it on your comfort level, and that would be you make a list of, as Dolores was mentioning first, the influencers that you want to follow and you want to keep track of. You make a list of the coalition partners you want to follow, and then systematically enter them in, and then as
Paul wanted to bring up.
Steve, did you want to?
Yeah.
Well, I would appreciate your advice and help. The effort is to try to contact everyone who has served on jury and been discharged, as well as everyone who received his summons and who's messing around with any kind of form of social media. There's no way of communicating with these people. And people who serve on the jury and have had a great experience can give us the best testimony, not only about juries, but about our legal system, about judges, about the sanctity of courts, about the rule of law. And these are people, citizens, who during 1 or 2 weeks of their lives come into our profession in a very intense way. And we don't have a way of keeping in touch with them. And the judges are, jurors' names are not given out to them. Judges are extremely, and I have gotten judges to agree around the country now. We're beginning this to see if it works. They hand to every juror that they discharge at the end of the case, when they thank them for their service, a little card that says, thank you for your service, if you are willing to talk about it, share with us what happened on the jury, please go to this website, and we'll give them the
Yeah.
website where they can click on.
So I want to.
We're trying to drive them to that website. When they get to the website, we're also trying to get people who, there are 3 portals. One portal is currently serving on a jury, and we tell them, you shouldn't be here. This violates the judge's instructions. We screw it around on social media while you're on a jury. And we explain the importance of that. People who are summoned, we ask them to go to a place where they see testimonials. Videotape. We send crews around the country to interview people who have been discharged and will tell us about their service. Great, I really enjoyed it. And so you can see these testimonials. Or we're beginning to add testimonials from famous people.
Yeah.
And stars, about jury service. And then people who have served on a jury, we want them to answer the questionnaire. It was too repetitive, the trial lasted too long, I didn't understand the instructions, the judge was mean, they didn't pay my parking. And maybe it'd be great, because, the problem is, I'm an old guy, I don't know how to do this. And maybe it'd be great to team up with a couple of ACS chapters as one of their projects. Because you get some law students who'd be interested in working on this project. And in an effort to try to contact jurors and talk to them about the system. Maybe that's what I should.
Well, I think there's a few ideas. Obviously, I think that is really important, especially since you're already planting people, your celebrities, and so on. Because that was what I was going to say. So you already have the hashtag juries matter. There's actually very similar in the courts world, the hashtag courts matter. So every time I see a news article that talks about something awesome a judge has done, hashtag judges matter, hashtag courts matter. So you can pick up the media you're generating or the video you're generating or a news story you didn't generate but said something great about how important juries are, and constantly just get that hashtag going again, talking to ACS, talking to student chapters, talking to others about, hey, promoting that and trying to retweet, I think is obviously a really good thing too. I think that's really, really important. You're already doing a lot of the work, and how do you do that? And making sure a quick link to whatever the questionnaire, have you served on a jury recently? And doing it on Twitter can be, we need your information because we want to know more about your awesome story or collect data, and telling people also why you want it. Because I think some people are skeptical about what you want to do with their information and so on, but to the extent you can make that a little explicit. But I think that there's I think social media can be used in such a great way for storytelling.
Yep.
And so how do you do that, and how do you lead it? And this gets you on Twitter, you can only do it short, but you can link to the video, and that image pops up, which I think gets a lot of attraction.
Yeah, there's something really interesting here that, I know I'm in a room full of lawyers thinking about what are the lines of empowering people to share their story, but making sure they don't share something that they shouldn't. But people have, you know, in their, I don't know where mine is, I was good, I didn't, people have the opportunity to tell your story when they walk out of the courthouse. So, you know, I too thought about connecting up with some chapters and just having people, when people leave, talk about time of day, we know when court gets out, and say, you know, tell us about your experience, sort of a, you know, a movable story core. And with, you know, I don't know if any of you have seen, now people are starting to make frames out of like styrofoam that can have your website on it. People can just hold it up in front of themselves and they can tell their story right there on their phone. You know, people want to be a celebrity. You talk about sharing celebrities. I mean, make everybody a celebrity. They can do their own videos. Say, I just finished jury duty and it was awesome. Jury duty matters. And it goes on their Facebook feed. If you put your hashtag around the frame, you know, and just tell people, look, just tell us it was great, or tell us, you know, just 2 minutes, and just get those things moving. People want to be the star of a video, and they'll share it for you. And then what you want to make sure is that your website and whatever hashtag you want, so that if their people are searching, they can see that, and that can drive people to your website. So I think if you can contact a few chapters and just have a conversation with them, we're doing this, you know, now in our town, and, you know, I told my son, I have ideas, but I'd rather host you and 10 of your friends, because they're gonna tell you how to do a geo filter on Snapchat or on Instagram stories. That is how they're gonna say, we wanna get these videos out there. So that's what I would suggest that you do. And I know we're over time, so I want to make sure to say thank you to our panelists, Adam and Lena. Thank you. And thank you to all of you. Thank you, Shelby, for live tweeting from the conference. And enjoy the rest of your conference.